You don't remember the moment you were wounded. There was no violent scene, no loud absence, just a long, slow silence that sank into your bones before you knew what silence was. His absence wasn't always obvious. It was more like a space hollow, aching, waiting. Other people talked about their fathers like characters in a story. You listened from the outside. You smiled, nodded, pretended it didn't matter. But something deep inside, you always noticed the missing voice, the missing hands, the missing weight of someone who was supposed to shape the ground beneath your feet. You learned to make do, to survive without asking questions. You became clever at adaptation, reading people, overperforming, folding into whatever shape the world required, just to feel safe. You stopped waiting for someone to show up. But even as you moved on, some part of you never did. You see it now, in quieter ways, in the unease that surfaces when someone gets too close, in the craving for validation that never quite fills the hole, in the way you shrink around authority or challenge it too fiercely, unsure whether you want to destroy the father or become him. No one told you how deep a shadow an absence can cast, that a void can have weight, that love not received still leaves an imprint, like a hand pressing down on a soul that never fully learned how to stand. You've learned how to function. You've built a life around the ache, but it still lives under your skin. This quiet sense that something essential was never given, and without it, a part of you always feels like you're guessing at love, at masculinity, at your own worth. You carry questions you don't know how to ask. What would it have meant to be seen through a father's eyes? What kind of man or person would you have become if someone had steadied your shoulders and said, "You belong here"? Instead, you learned to disappear, not obviously, but in moments where your voice caught in your throat, where your needs felt like too much, where your anger had nowhere to go but inward. And no one ever noticed, because the world doesn't grieve what it never saw, so you became invisible, even to yourself, a ghost raised in daylight, wearing the mask of strength, while your foundation quietly cracked beneath the surface. This is where the wound lives, not in drama, but in the quiet, in the smile you force when someone says dad without thinking, in the space at the table, or the silence on Father's Day, or the pang when you try to imagine someone who never became real in your life. You've built yourself from scraps. You've survived what was never named. But somewhere inside, that child still waits not for a father, perhaps, but for someone to say, "You didn't imagine this." It did shape you, and it matters, and maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop surviving the wound and start listening to it. Not as weakness, but as the first doorway back to yourself. You don't notice the echo at first. It hides behind the voice in your head that says, "You're not enough," or "Don't ask for too much." It feels like your own thoughts, but it isn't. It's the residue of someone who was supposed to be there, guiding, grounding, reflecting something essential back to you. When a father is absent, the mind fills in the blanks, not with facts, but with feelings, and feelings become beliefs. You start to believe that love is something you have to earn, that being good buys you safety, that independence is a necessity, not a choice. You crave direction, but you teach yourself to navigate without a compass. You long for affirmation, but settle for performance. You internalize a silent rule: don't need too much, or you'll be left again. So you become self-sufficient, even as a part of you aches to be seen. This early absence doesn't just live in memories, it embeds itself into the architecture of your mind. It shapes the way you attach. You either hold on to tightly, fearing the next abandonment, or you keep your distance, certain that closeness always ends in loss. You live between extremes: hypervigilance and emotional detachment, never quite sure what safety feels like. There's a tension you carry in your body, a readiness to be rejected, even in relationships that are kind, loving, safe. Your nervous system still flinches, waiting for the silence to return, waiting to be reminded that something essential can disappear without warning. And so you replay the same dynamics unconsciously. You choose people who cannot stay, or you become the one who leaves first. You test love, push it, pull it, watch it crack, because it's easier to control the collapse than to be caught off guard again. The absence becomes a mirror. Every interaction is filtered through a question you can't articulate. If I were truly enough, wouldn't he have stayed? You don't ask it aloud. You barely know it's there. but it hums beneath your choices. It echoes in your relationships, your work, your identity. You tell yourself you've moved on, that the past is the past, but the psyche doesn't work. In time it works in impressions, and what was never spoken, never soothed, becomes a looping script. Prove yourself, protect yourself, don't trust too easily, don't feel too much. But what if this voice you obey isn't yours? What if it's the voice of a wound that learned to speak before you did? What if you've been following a map drawn by absence, not truth? You start to question, not in anger but in quiet, trembling honesty. You wonder what parts of your personality were born from pain. What parts of your independence are actually a strategy to survive. Love that was never offered. This is not self-blame. This is self-recognition. You begin to trace the contours of your mind and see fingerprints you never placed there. Patterns that didn't begin with you, but have lived inside you for so long. You've mistaken them for your reflection. The echo is not your fault, but hearing it clearly, consciously might be the first step toward rewriting the inner dialogue, toward speaking to yourself in a voice your father never gave you, but that you are now learning to give yourself. And in that quiet awareness, something shifts. Not everything heals at once, but the questions begin to matter more than the silence. And in the asking, you begin to reclaim your own voice, not an echo, but something real, something new. You think you're making choices. You think your reactions are yours. But beneath your conscious mind, something older is moving. Not logic, not instinct, a script. You don't remember writing it, but you perform it anyway, over and over, in the way you chase those who withhold affection, in the way you pull away when someone gets too close, in the way you create distance just enough to feel in control, just enough to not be left first. It's not that you want to suffer, it's that part of you only feels at home in suffering, because it's familiar, because it matches the original. Wound, because pain is predictable, and predictability feels safer than vulnerability. You find yourself drawn to people who mirror the absence, unavailable, distant, distracted, not because you want to relive it, but because some part of you is still trying to rewrite it, still hoping that this time, if you do everything right, they'll stay. But they don't. And when they leave, the wound reopens, not just the hurt of now but the ache of then. And each time, it confirms the lie you've been carrying, that you are not enough to be chosen, that love is earned through suffering, that your needs are too much. You're not broken, you're patterned, and patterns protect until they imprison. You dismiss compliments, but absorb criticism. You overextend yourself, hoping to be worthy. You shrink your voice in rooms that remind you of him, the authority figure, the absent one, the silent judge. You become pleasing, perfect, performative, not because you want approval, but because you believe love must be bought. There's a moment, small, almost imperceptible, when you feel the trigger pull. Someone ignores your message, someone disappoints you, and suddenly, your body tightens, your mind races, your heart prepares for war or withdrawal. It's not about the moment, it's about the memory the moment touched. You react with urgency, but urgency is rarely about the present. It's the past, flooding into now. It's the child in you screaming, please don't disappear again. You see how often you confuse intensity with love, how you mistake chaos for connection, because calm feels foreign, because peace feels boring, because your nervous system only relaxes when it's bracing for impact. These aren't flaws, they are strategies, brilliant ones, created by a younger you who had to survive a world that lacked safety, consistency, guidance. But what once protected you is now costing you. It keeps you in cycles you don't understand but can't seem to break. And now the awareness arrives. Subtle, stunning. You begin to recognize the pattern, not from judgment, but from curiosity. You stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start wondering, where did I learn this? The questions become keys. Why do I feel most alive in instability? Why do I silence myself around power? Why do I offer love where it won't be returned? You're not acting out of preference. You're following an inherited rhythm. But now, you're beginning to hear the song, and you realize it's not the only one you can dance to. This is the doorway, not to resolution, but to choice. For the first time, the pattern is visible, and what is seen can be changed, not all at once, but slowly, deliberately. with compassion for the one who wrote the script and power for the one who's finally rewriting it. There are parts of you you've tried to forget, not because they're evil, but because they're wounded. Anger that surged when you were ignored, jealousy that burned when others had what you didn't, the sharp, quiet envy, the rage, the shame. You buried them deep, convinced that hiding your darkness would keep you lovable. But the shadow doesn't disappear just because you close your eyes. It waits, not to punish you, but to be seen, because everything you reject becomes a ghost, and ghosts don't leave until they're heard. You were told to be good, to be strong, to be unaffected. So the scared child, the angry teen, the longing adult, all of them went underground. You wore masks of composure, smiled when you were breaking, gave more than you had, and called it strength. But there's a moment when the mask begins to crack, when your reactions are louder than the situation, when your voice shakes and you don't know why, when you push someone away and feel emptier afterward. These aren't failures, they're signals, clues from the parts of you you've abandoned. You were shaped by absence, and in that shaping, you lost sight of the whole. The shadow isn't evil. It's the grief you weren't allowed to feel. It's the need you were told to suppress. It's the child in you still asking, why wasn't I worth staying for? Facing the shadow takes courage, because it asks you to stop pretending, to stop performing wholeness, to sit with your ache without trying to fix it, to feel your anger without letting it consume you, to look at the part of yourself you've judged the harshest and offer it compassion instead of exile. You're not just the light, you're also the longing, the unmet needs, the defensiveness that flares when someone touches a nerve, the part of you that fears love because it never learned how to trust it. When you turn toward the shadow, you don't collapse, you expand. You become more honest, more human, more whole. You start to see that your darkness isn't a flaw. It's a message, a map. It shows you where you've been hurt and where you still need care. It shows you what you've been running from and what you're ready to reclaim. The rage you carry isn't the enemy. It's the fire of a child who was never protected. The grief you suppress isn't weakness. It's the depth of your capacity to feel. And the fear you hide isn't shameful. It's the instinct of someone who once had to survive alone. You begin to gather these parts, not to indulge them, but to understand them. You say, I see you, I hear you, I'm not leaving you behind. And in that act of naming what was hidden, something shifts. You're no longer at war with yourself. You're no longer splitting into acceptable and unacceptable. You're just here, with all of it, with all of you. This is what integration looks like. Not perfection, but presence. Not control, but connection. You carry the shadow not as a burden now, but as a teacher. A reminder that even your darkest parts are worthy of love. And in that embrace, you begin finally to feel free. You were handed a story before you knew how to read it. It wasn't spoken aloud, but it lived in the silences, in the unanswered questions, in the spaces where a father should have been. You filled in the blanks the only way a child could. It must be me. That belief became a framework, not chosen, absorbed. A quiet thread woven into every thought. I'm not worth staying for. I have to earn love. Something in me pushes people away. You didn't question it. You adapted to it. Built a self around survival. Sharp, attuned, high-functioning. But under the competence was an ache. A hunger to belong not just to others, but to yourself. Now you're beginning to see it. The story wasn't truth. It was inheritance. And what was inherited can be rewritten. You no longer have to be the one who always gives. You no longer have to be the one who expects to be left. You are allowed to be chosen, even by yourself. So you pause and ask the question that turns the page. What if I am not broken? What if I was never too much or not enough? What if my worth was never up for negotiation? This isn't delusion, it's reclamation. You are no longer living by the terms of someone else's absence. You're learning to speak in your own voice, to become the narrator of your own becoming. You begin to hold yourself differently, less like a problem, more like a person who went through something, a person who adapted brilliantly to pain but no longer needs to carry it like an identity. The compassion you extend toward others, you turn it inward now. You forgive the version of you who people please just to feel safe. You hold space for the one who shut down to avoid more rejection. You thank the masks not because you want to keep wearing them, but because they once kept you alive. And as you do, something subtle begins to shift. Not everything is urgent anymore. You stop bracing for the crash. You start trusting that not every ending will mirror the first one. That absence was a chapter, not the whole book. This is the part where you plant new seeds, not affirmations to cover pain, but truths to guide healing. I am allowed to take up space. I am worthy of being seen. I do not need to prove my worth through sacrifice. I am not the wound. I am the one who's healing it. Agency isn't about control. It's about choosing your response. It's about deciding that your past gets to inform you but not define you. It's about writing a new story, one line at a time. A story where you are no longer chasing love, but embodying it. Not begging to be chosen, but becoming the one who chooses. And even on days when the old script whispers again, you meet it with presence. You say, yes, I remember you, but I don't belong to you anymore. This is how it starts, with a whisper of truth louder than the lies, with a soft defiance against the roles you were cast in, with the quiet power of someone who finally realizes they are the author now. There's a moment when holding on becomes heavier than the wound itself. Not because the pain isn't real, but because it's no longer needed. It's served its purpose. It's shown you where it hurts, what you lacked, and how deeply you loved. But now, it asks to be put down. Detachment is not forgetting. It is not coldness. It is not pretending you were never hurt. It is the art of remembering without reliving, of feeling the echo, but choosing not to answer its call. You don't erase the past. You release its grip. There was a time when revisiting the pain gave you a sense of identity. It reminded you that what happened mattered, that your suffering was valid. But now, you are allowed to build something beyond survival. You are allowed to evolve. So you begin small. You notice when an old memory floods in, and instead of drowning, you watch. You let it pass like weather. You say, yes, that happened. And then, but this is now. Boundaries emerge not to push people out, but to keep you in. To protect the version of you that no longer wants to bleed for belonging. To create space between what you feel and what you follow. You don't owe your past self endless reenactments. You owe them peace. Detachment is not indifference. It is devotion to your present. You once thought holding on was loyalty, but it was repetition. The same story, the same pain, the same roles over and over. Now, you choose clarity, not out of bitterness, but because your future is not a mirror. The people who couldn't love you the way you needed, they were a chapter, not your reflection. You don't have to prove anything to them. You don't need them to see your worth for it to exist. Their absence was real, but so is your becoming. You grieve with open hands. You say goodbye without a war. Not every wound needs a confrontation. Not every scar needs to be explained. There's a freedom in knowing you can stop explaining yourself. You no longer need your pain to be understood in order to let it go. You are not erasing the past, you are stepping out of its shadow. You've learned how to feel. Now, you're learning how to choose what you carry. You walk through your memories with reverence, not resentment. You visit the old rooms, but you don't move back in. You honor the hurt without letting it make decisions for you. You stop seeking justice from those who cannot offer it. This is your quiet rebellion, not with anger, but with detachment. Not by becoming harder, but by becoming more whole. Letting go doesn't mean it didn't matter. It means it mattered, and now it's over. The story lives inside you, but you are no longer its prisoner. You are its witness, its survivor, its alchemist. And so, gently, you begin to untie the threads, the expectations, the illusions, the inherited beliefs that never belonged to you. You don't need to hate the past to walk away from it. You only need to love yourself more than the story that kept you small. This is what freedom looks like. Not forgetting, not forcing, just choosing again and again to return to yourself. You've earned the right to live unchained. You've earned the right to be new. You were never meant to stay broken. You were meant to burn, to crack open, to fall apart so something truer could rise in the ruins. This is where your story shifts, where pain is no longer a chain, but a catalyst, where you stop trying to fix what was missing and start becoming what you needed. You are no longer defined by what left. You are defined by what remained. Your breath, your will, your hunger for something more than survival. the absence that haunted you. It taught you to feel the weight of silence. But now you speak, not in anger, but in clarity, not to be heard by the one who vanished, but to hear yourself loud and unwavering. Power is not loud. It's not vengeance. It's not proving that you didn't need them after all. It's subtler. It's choosing yourself in the quiet moments. It's refusing to abandon yourself the way they did. It's showing up again and again when no one else does. You become the father you never had, the protector, the guide, the presence that steadies you when doubt returns. You become both the wound and the healer. There's no dramatic rescue. There's only you making different choices in the dark, trusting yourself even when the old fear whispers, learning to hold your boundaries without guilt, learning to say I matter without apology. Power is responsibility to your own becoming, to your own voice, to your own path, even when it feels unfamiliar. The absence gave you questions, but you gave yourself answers, hard-won, earned, not handed to you because they couldn't be. You've been tested in silence. You've walked through shame, through self-doubt, through the ache of not being enough in someone else's eyes. But now you see, you were never incomplete, just unseen. So you rise, not with revenge in your chest, but with resolve in your spine. You are no longer asking for permission, no longer waiting for validation. You validate yourself by the way you live, by the choices you make when no one is watching, by the strength it takes to stay kind, even when life hasn't been. This is reclamation, not of what was lost, but of who you've always been, beneath the grief. You are no longer at the mercy of old stories. You're the author now. And this chapter is different. It doesn't start with pain. It starts with presence, with power, with a choice to rise not in spite of what hurt you, but because of it. This is your turning point. This is you no longer looking back, but walking forward fully, with your heart intact, your mind awake, and your soul finally unbound. No one is coming, and somehow, you are no longer waiting. You've stopped searching for the man who left. Stopped chasing the echo of a voice that never called your name. Stopped standing in the doorway of your own life, hoping someone else would walk in and claim it. Because you have. This is not the end of the pain. It is the end of its dominion. The ache is still there, quiet now, no longer sharp, just present, like a scar that no longer stings, but reminds you where you've been. You don't need to be rescued anymore. You've learned how to hold yourself, how to speak gently when the old panic stirs, how to stay present when your mind tempts you back into abandonment. You are your own anchor now. You've become the father you once mourned, not by mimicking his absence, but by doing the opposite, by showing up for yourself in the moments he never could. You've stopped asking the world to give you what you give so freely to yourself now: attention, patience, protection, belief. You lead yourself with quiet authority, not loud, not forceful, just steady. You don't need control over others, only trust in your own presence. The kind of trust built from not leaving yourself, even when it hurts. Especially then, there's power in becoming your own parent, not in a hardened, bitter way, but in a way that softens you, that makes space for grief without drowning in it, that allows you to hold both absence and abundance at once. You see, now it was never about replacing him. It was about remembering yourself. You were never incomplete, just waiting to be reclaimed. You no longer confuse love with earning, or silence with safety. You don't mold yourself to fit into broken places. You create space that fits you. You've stopped performing worth, stopped proving, apologizing, shrinking. You walk differently now, not because you've arrived, but because you've returned to yourself. That boy who waited at the window, you've wrapped your arms around him. You've told him he is safe, that he doesn't have to wait anymore, that you're here now, and you're not leaving. This is what sovereignty feels like. Not perfection, not invulnerability, but presence. A life no longer ruled by lack, but shaped by meaning. A quiet kind of wholeness, the kind that doesn't scream to be seen, because it sees itself. You've made peace with the story, not by rewriting the past, but by ending its repetition. You are not him. You are not what he couldn't give. You are what you choose to build now, from the inside out. This is fatherhood from within, not a title, but a posture, a devotion to your own becoming, a vow to never abandon yourself again. And so you stand, in silence, in strength, in sovereignty, not waiting, not needing, just being, finally home.